All right, everybody. We are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Cinnamon Moffett. I am the Research Program Manager here at Oregon State University's Hatfield Marine Science Center. And again, thank you so much for being at today's seminar. This is a hybrid event, and so we have folks online and folks in the room. For folks that are online, your cameras, mics, and screen shares are disabled, but we hope that you interact with us using the chat function. And Roseanne, who is our volunteer today, will make sure that she gets to any of your technical questions, and we'll be able to read out any of your questions to today's speaker at the end of today's talk. For folks in the room, I think most of you I recognize, but remember, when we get to the section where we have questions, if you raise your hand or go to the mic stand on the side of the room and ask your question using a mic, folks online can hear us as well. But again, thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. I have just a couple of announcements and then we'll hand it off and get started. So I wanted to remind folks that November 2nd, it's already November, is our next seminar, and we have Alessandra, Bertos from the project manager of the Cascadia Coastline and People's Hazards Research Hub, who's going to be here talking about how Cascadia communities are increasing their resilience to coastal hazards. So a very different topic than today, but I hope that you come on back, same place, same time, just next week for our next seminar next week. If you are interested in any of our talks that we do here at Hatfield, if you go to our webpage, scroll to the bottom, there's a calendar of events there. You can get all the information about upcoming events and how to participate either on site or online. But for today, our speaker has been invited by Ryan Tucker Jones, who is a professor of history at the University of Oregon. He has spoke with us many times, at least twice, he says, and about his documentation work on the history of whaling. And so we're really thankful that Ryan helped us connect to today's speaker. So I'm going to actually hand it off to Ryan, and he's going to introduce our speaker today.
Thanks so much, Cinnamon. And it's great to be back here and not giving a presentation. I'm really looking forward to being in the audience today. And it's my pleasure to introduce a friend and colleague of mine, Professor Akamine Jun. Akamine, I know, is going to talk a little bit about his own intellectual background in this talk, so I'll just keep it to a few of the important highlights. He received his PhD at the University of the Philippines in Manila, where he studied ethnology, linguistics, sociology, a whole variety of disciplines, and really became interested there in, as he put it, controversial marine harvest, and wrote a book which came out in 2013 called Sea Cucumber War, a great book on the exploitation of sea cucumbers in the Pacific. Since 2014, Akamine Jun has been professor at Hitotsubashi University in Tokyo, where he's been concentrating and extending his interest in food studies. And part of that interest has been an interest in whaling and the consumption of whale products in Japan. And that's how I came to know Akamine Jun at a conference that I put together in Honolulu a few years ago, where we were examining the history of human cetacean relations throughout the Pacific. Akamine presented a really wonderfully nuanced and carefully researched paper on the consumption of beaked whales in northern Japan. And I think that you'll see that same kind of care and diligent research in what he's going to present today, which is a combination of his own research in the past of Japanese whaling, as well as his personal experience sailing with the Japanese whaling fleet. I think I'm going to hand it over now to Professor Akamine Jun.
Hello. I really thank you for inviting me or providing this opportunity to be here. And I didn't expect so beautiful and more than what I expected audience, and happy to share my idea or exchange views from you. And I understand that some may have different views to me. Okay, I have been interested in cultural history of controversial marine foods in Asia, and for the last 30 years, starting in the Philippines and most of the Asian and Pacific. Through tracing the supply chains, I have investigated development of such industries, relation to environmental conservation. For example, on your left top, sea cucumbers has been important trading commodities for the last at least 300 years, and shark's fin as well, but those are really controversial these days. And if I studied on the conservation issues, and especially marine species, and I came across whaling issues, and then I decided to study these issues. And even in Japanese language, I finished my studies on sea cucumbers in 2010, and I proceeded to studies on cetaceans, whaling issues, and I collected the life story, oral history of whalers, 6 whalers, and published in 2017. Today, I like to talk 3 points. One is current state of Japanese whaling and whale meat consumption. And second, changes of Japanese pelagic or offshore whaling since 2019, when Japan withdrew from IWC. And the third, this is my main topic today, account of my experiences on Nishimaru. This is a factory ship, the last remaining factory ship in the world in 2021, what we call NP, North Pacific 2021 1W, because the company divided their operation into 3 phases, and I joined the first one, 1W. And 2021 is the 3rd operation after withdrawal from the IWC. Okay, this graph shows the production of whale oil and whale meat by the Japanese Antarctic whaling fleets before the war, started in 1934/35 until 1935 and 76. This is the end of the fin whaling. And you can understand that the light brown bars exceeded the dark brown bars. That means Japanese fleets produced more meat than oils. So if you look at the pre-war period, Japanese fleets produce almost whale oil. And then from Antarctic, they headed for either UK or Netherlands to sell their products, and then came back to Japan. And post-war period, Japan had a hard time to look for food, shortage period, and that time we have no sovereignties, and GHQ, General MacArthur, ordered, okay, you guys you should go to the Antarctic and harvest the meat for consumption, okay? But that ended 1949. And after we became independent, Japanese fleets started more oil production than meat production. But in the end of the 50s and until now, we produce more meat than oils. And currently, of course, no whale oil market existed, and we produce only meat. But it is the same as in Norway and Iceland as well. And if you know the history of cetacean management by IWC, you understand the BWU. So I don't go in detail, but you can understand that when the BW decreased, then the more meat production occurred. by the Japanese fleets. Oops. And one blue whale can produce 110 barrels whale oil, and fin whale maybe 55 barrels, and 2 fin whales are equal to 1 blue whale. And humpback whale 2.5 humpback whale can be equal to 1 blue whale, and in the case of sei whale, 6 needed to produce 110 barrels of whale oil. So if we look at the construction of the species, something like this. Before the war, we have only 3 species caught: blue whale, humpback whale, and fin whale. But after the war, we started with blue whale and fin whales. But if you see the relationship between BWU and the species we caught, you also understand while the decreasing of BWU, more sei whale were caught by Japanese fleets. That means in certain period, let's say before 1963 or 4 time, fin whale was a major target species. On the other hand, after that, sei whale replaced the fin whale case. And finally, minke whale was the only species which Japanese fleet were able to catch in the Antarctic. And this one, the Antarctic whaling, prospered before. You can understand, even, the Antarctic whaling prospered before World War II. And then after the war, IWC was established, and they put the management tool as BW as introduced. So the UK withdrew from whaling in 1963 and 4. The Netherlands followed in the next season, and Norway finally withdrew from the whaling in the Antarctic in 1968 and 69. And this is the time Japan switched to whale meat production rather than whale oil. This is a brief history of Japanese whaling in the Antarctic. So if we look at the consumption or production of meat, something like this, from 1957 to 75, Japanese consume more than 100,000 tons of whale meat in Japan. And most of the whale meat were produced from the Antarctic. This graph includes domestic production along the coastal waters, as well as some imports from other countries such as Iceland, Norway, South Korea, Brazil, Peru, etc., or Spain. But most of the whale meat were produced from the Antarctic whaling. So in 1962, annual per capita consumption whale meat was 2.4 kilograms when Japan marked her largest whale meat consumption. However, even those what we call golden age of whale meat consumption in Japan from 1957 to 1975, pork, chicken, beef exceeded the whale meat. Well, look at this huge changes when the whale meat was most consumed in 1962. Annual per capita consumption was 2.4 kilograms, but 2022, after 60 years, we cannot say in kilograms, possibly 16 point something grams per year. And on the other hand, pork from 2.3 kilograms to 13.1 kilograms. And chicken 1.2 to 14.6 kilograms, and the beef 1.2. And now 6.2 kilograms. So the consumption of meat has changed drastically. And I like to tell you that not all Japanese consume whale meat. Probably certain group of people consume a lot. And on the other hand, most of the Japanese do not eat whale meat. So this is reality. But if we trace the history of Japanese whaling in the Edo period, 17th to mid-19th centuries, you can understand, some areas of Japan consume, or even today prefer, whale meat. So I will explain briefly. So let's say the number of cetacean species around Japan are almost half of the world existing species of 85, or some scholars say 88. But anyway, we have 40 species around Japanese waters. So this may be the ecological reason some Japanese communities had opportunities to encounter cetaceans, and people in such communities learn to utilize some species of cetaceans. And where are they? Those are the western part of Japan, not whole archipelagos, only western part of Japan. So let's say present Nagasaki in Kyushu, Saga, and Yamaguchi prefectures were the main whaling sites of early modern whaling, before the Norwegian type of modern whaling was introduced into Japan. They hunt whales with harpoons and nets combined. Some communities abandoned whaling when modern whaling method was introduced in the early 20th century. However, people from such communities still favor whale meat in great volumes. And there's another ecological reasons. You understand what is Kuroshio, the current. And there is another branch, Tsushima Current. Can you see? Between Korean Peninsula and the islands of Japan, we have Tsushima Current. And then along that Tsushima Current, let's say present-day Nagasaki, Saga, Fukuoka locates, and Yamaguchi as well. So these are called in Japanese Saikai, meaning West Sea, whaling grounds. And do you have pointer? Do you know how to use the pointer? Oops. Oh yeah, here, sorry, maybe here.
Turn it back on.
Okay. Okay, sorry. So this is Taiji. I think this is very famous or notorious for drive hunting of dolphins. So this is the very beginning of end of 16th centuries. They started organized whaling, but very famous. But as a size, the Mastomi party in present-day Nagasaki was the largest than Taiji group. So these areas are the most prosperous whaling regions during Edo period, 17th to 19th century. Okay. And those, even Nagasaki, Saga, Fukuoka, Yamaguchi, they don't do any whaling present day. However, Nagasaki consume per capita consumption whale meat. Nagasaki was #1 in 2008. During research whale period, the company who owns the factory ship made a research on whale meat consumption. And according to them, #1 was Nagasaki, and #2, Saga. And #3, Miyagi. This is the exception. Then Miyagi has Ayukawa. This is another famous modern whaling stations started in early 20th centuries. And up to now, they have small scale coastal whaling for minke whales. And they prefer whale meat until now. But those, again, Nagasaki, Saga, Yamaguchi, and Fukuoka, they gave up whaling, but still they prefer consuming whale meat. For example, those western part of Japan, on the New Year's Day, they often eat whale meat. And this is a very unique characteristics in those regions. So I should say the whale meat foodways in the contemporary Japan is regionally uneven. It is deeply rooted in the western part of Japan. This is very much important when we discuss the whaling issues or whale meat consumption in Japan. For example, if you travel Nagasaki and you walk around in a drinking place, you may encounter this kind of flags. It says, "We serve whale dish, Whale City, Nagasaki." Or this is another festival, Kunchi, Nagasaki Kunchi. It occurs every year, every October, but once in 7 years, there is this kind of right whale float appears at the festival. And last October, 7, 8, 9, I was there and I enjoyed this festival for the first time in my life. And I felt that the memory of early modern whaling is deeply inherited in the present day Nagasaki. And during this festival, if I visited supermarket, ordinary supermarket, many kinds of whale meat are available, but except ream meat. And meaning to say that they prefer blabbers, intestines, and tail, not meat, tail parts. I will show you later. So this is very unique characteristics in Nagasaki, see? And again, Iceland, Norway, and Japan are now engaging in commercial whaling. And Iceland targets fin and mink, Norway mink only. In Japan, sei, Bryde, and minke whales since 2019. And we have two kinds of whaling, as you may know. One is offshore whaling by a factory ship, and another is coastal small-scale whaling. And the latter targets only minke whale. And our quota by the government is calculated by the RMP, Device Management Procedures, and 134 minke whales are available. And on the other hand, for factory ship whaling, we have 25 sei and 187 Bryde whales. And I joined the 52 days trip from June 10 to August 1, 2021. And during this period, I came on board the catcher boat. We called the third Yusin-maru for 8 nights from July 7 to July 16, and observed hunts of 13 Bryde whales. My understanding, whaling with a factory ship is the most distinguished characteristics of Japanese whaling if compared with Iceland and Norwegian whaling. And we don't hunt any whales in the Antarctic these days, and we focus on the North Pacific. So Nishimaru is the last remaining whaling factory ship, but this is very old, completed as a trawler in 1987 and converted into whaling factory ship in 1991. So it engaged in whaling 32 years old, 32 years. And I will show the picture at the last slide of mine. The new factory ship is now constructing, and the new one will replace this Nishimaru next year, okay? So difference between factory ship whaling in the Antarctic and North Pacific, two fish whaling grounds. Antarctic was started ahead, and even before the war, 7 seasons from 1934 to 35. On the other hand, North Pacific, only 2 seasons operated from 1940 and 1941. And after the war, as I said, GHQ ordered to resume wearing in Antarctic, and it started 1946, 47 to 86 and 87, the end of the commercial wearing that time. On the other hand, North Pacific, it started after the war, 1952, and ended in 1979, earlier than the Antarctic wearing, and research wearing as well. In the Antarctic, it has no pause and directly switched to research wearing in 1987-88 season up to the end of the RWC period. On the other hand, North Pacific, it was started 1994 and 2018. In 2021, the company divided, as I said previously, its operation into 3 phases. 1 double, June 15 to July 29, and we hunted. I joined this operation, 84 Bryde whales. And 2 double, I didn't join, August 8 to September 24, 83 Bryde whale. And 3 double, October 5 to November 8. And they got 20 Bryde whale and 25 say whales. So the red line shows the trajectories of our expedition as 1 double. We started in fishing ground A, and we stayed there 16 days and caught 38 Bryde whales, and moved north, and we stayed this whaling grounds for 5 days, and we caught 9 heads. And finally, we moved to the almost end of the EEZ, and we stayed there 8 days, and we caught 13 whales. And almost the end of our expedition, we got the typhoon, and we needed to evacuate from the typhoon. And we evacuated near Tomakomai port for 2 nights, July 26 and 28. This is our trajectory. And Nishimaru, we have 91 crew, including deck department, captain, and engine department, 11 crews, and cook department, very important as well, 6. And administrative department, 12, including myself. And the most important on the Nishimaru was manufacturing department. They friends, and they make products at the factories. And we have medical doctor, 1 medical doctor, and 1 nurse on the boat. And this is the list of crew members of the catcher boat. Of course, we need 1 captain, but should be a former gunner, and 1 gunner, and 2 navigators or mates, first and second mates. But these 2 are apprentice gunners practicing. And we have 4 engine department crews and 1 communication officer, deck department, 6 deck department, and 2 cooks. And also, from now on, I will show some bloody pictures, and be careful. So when I saw these scenes, feeling like deja vu, and I happened to reminded me, should be a Gulliver at Lilliput Kingdom. Yeah. And when I moved to a catcher boat, I joined searching for the whale, but it's very difficult. And all available crew, including captain and gunner, searches for the whales. When taking this particular photograph, 14 crew members out of 17 engaged in searching. Searching starts at around 5 o'clock in the morning and ends if we found 2, because these are the normal for the day. But sometimes we finish before noon, sometimes we finish at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So very depends on the situations. And we search for whales on the upper bridge. It is like 10 meters high from the sea level. Or 3 special crew should search for whales on topmast. And it is 18 meters high from the sea levels. It's very high. For example, he's a top searchers, and we have 2, left and right. And looking at him, for example, of course, he needs binoculars, and all of them needs binoculars. But this guy on the center needs to hold the mic as well. So he has nowhere to hold the pipe. So he was in this kind of a small, narrow space, not to fall down. And he needs to identify the species, whether it is good or not. I mean, precise species or not, because sometimes sei and Bryde whales are confusing. Of course, Bryde whales prefers warmer waters around 21 degrees, but sometimes confused. So he needs to be careful about identifying the species. And very much important activities. And average working time for hunting 2 whales was 409 minutes, and median 356 and 369 for my experience, 13 species. And once confirmed the precise species by the topmast and enough size, we set the enough size more than 12 meters long at smallest. The catcher boat began chasing. Normally the boat approaches to 30 to 40 meters to the chased whale before shooting. And the first happened and hit, and the whale dove immediately being hit. In order to prevent the rope being not entangled to boat screw, the gunner instructs how to operate the boat. And this is a very much tension moment. And after tugging the rope, this time we had a second shot. And finally, the gunner shoots the spinal cord with a rifle and makes sure the whale has completely died. While I joined in hunting operation, an average time required from the beginning of chasing and hit is only 9 minutes and 6 minutes median. Out of 13 heads from B52 to B64, the numbering by ourselves, second shot was conducted 4 times, and meaning 9 cases are instantaneously dead. And this is offing the catch we call toge to the factory ship. And you may know that the stern slipway was introduced into the Antarctic whaling in the 1925-26 season, which activated Antarctic whaling, according to Tannesen. See? So this is the place which I show you, the moment of hunting. And this is the EEZ, so almost the end of the EEZ. And that the specimen we call B63, Bryde whale 63. The body length is a bit larger than the average, and the body weight also heavier than the average for the 84 specimens. And skin thickness, yes, this is a bit thicker than the average centimeters, and the girth was the same, and yield ratio was a little bit more than the average. And this is putting up. And when putting up the catch, the back of the well should be facing the left. This is due to the flensing reasons. And before flensing started, each specimen is measured by the researchers of the ICRJ, Institute of Cetacean Research of Japan. Aside from collecting data of length, weight, skin thickness, and girth, they collect blood and some tissues for DNA analysis and measuring the girth. And flensing begins by cutting off the tail. This one started. And then length of flensing finishes when head skin is removed from its scalp. Flens of the B63, which I showed you previously, began at 2 o'clock, 2:40 in the afternoon, and finished at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It took 80 minutes for flensing. Average flensing minutes for the 84 specimens during the 1W was 95 minutes. So this is much, this specimen, B63, was larger than the average, but quicker than the average flensing times. Okay, I'll go ahead. Flensing requires to make best use of wire work with help of winches and capstans, but it was very dangerous to be careful about which. And as a beginner, I tried to take photos, but very difficult to put myself near to the body, because they said, oh, very careful and better not be closer to the whales. And time is limited, so I go through this one, tail meat, and you can see the marbling of fat in something like Wagyu style. And we appreciate a lot this part. And the fresh tail meat, for example, of say whale fetched 110,000 Japanese yen. It's like $800 US these days per kilogram at the Shimonoseki Fish Market in November 2021. However, this is very expensive. However, during the 1W, only 4 metric ton of tail meat was produced, which shared only 0.65% of the total 600 tons of products. And if you know, familiar with the Moby Dick, because this is the sperm whale case, but chapter 64, there is a title, Stabbed Supper, and the second mate stab ordered the dagu, steak, before I sleep, you dagu, overhead you go and cut me one from his smoke. So I'm wondering about which part of it, and possibly this kind of tail meat, which Japanese people really prefer, and possibly Melville through his experience in sailors, whalers, he knew this part of the meat was the most delicious. This is my understanding. And okay, other part of the meat. Okay, oh, this is the famous, how do I call, the accordion part of the meat. It's another Japanese favorite due to, we call the whale bacon made of this. We salted and just boiled. And yeah, even on the boat, the 6 cooks are good at cooking, of course, and they made sometimes for whale bacon for us. And skins. And if you come to Japan and bravely enough to try lean meat at the restaurant, you may be served with this kind of skin. This is the way we eat lean meat with skin. The skin or blubber provides you a sweeter taste, like this. And can you imagine this is the tongue of whales? And in Osaka especially, this part, tongue, is highly appreciated. And this is stomach and small intestines, and those are boiled and eat like this. Okay, this is going to be final. Launching ceremony was held at Shimonoseki last August 31 this year. And Kyoto Senpaku is the owner of the current Nishimaru, and this new one is also made by Kyoto Senpaku. Needs to be independent to eke out the profit as a commercial company. And this new one, new vessel, will be operating next season. And according to them, if you are interested in on board, just ask them. And they are welcome foreign researchers as well. And after 2 or 3 years, when everything goes smooth, I myself like to join the new one again. And thank you very much. This is the end of the present preparation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing with us. I know in this room, there might have been some really difficult pictures to see, but I thank you for sharing. I wanted to open it up for questions. Are there any questions online, Roseanne? Okay, if anybody online has questions, go ahead and put it into the chat. For folks in the room, does anybody have questions?
Yeah.
All right, 1 second.
So you mentioned you were kind of going into prices a bit, especially around the tail. And you said it's mostly Western Japan that still participates in the consumption of whale. Are they higher in terms of like economic wealth? Because it seems like whale's quite expensive. So are you finding that it's, more of these communities that are richer in profits that are consuming whales, or is it kind of within the community itself, it's just traditional and it's all different poverty lines?
Thank you. Oh, in case of Nagasaki, for example, for New Year's, of course, it is not cheap. So not everyday meat. So some special occasions, let's say New Year's or Obon Festival in summer, or anything they feel like celebrating. So it's not a daily food. So we need to pay, this is not so much cheaper. So how do I say, special meat. Even in those Nagasaki, Saga, Fukuoka, consume more than average, but still for them, where meat is specialty food. Is it okay with you? Yeah. Thank you.
Any questions online?
Yes. Who's welcome to the launching ceremony of the Kangai Maru?
Pardon, who?
Who
is welcome?
Who's welcome to the launching ceremony?
No, okay. No. I was, of course, invited to be there. But my point is, if one of you, audience, are interested in joining the expedition in the future, on board and observe how they how they process on the boat, factory ship, the company will welcome. Of course, not all of you, because we have limited space or rooms, but maybe one each other. But the company is open. This is the big changes between research whaling period and commercial whaling period. The company can decide.
All right, questions in the room?
Thank you so much for sharing your personal experience. It's very interesting. I wonder, do you think that commercial whaling would survive in Japan without government subsidies? I mean, I'm just curious, for example, of who invested in this factory ship, and do you know how much it cost?
Okay, thank you. It's very difficult to answer. Who knows in the future, well, of course. But in this case, the new vessels cost 7 billion yen. I don't know how much in US dollars this is because yen is very low, but 70 billions. This is the public number. So if you Google, it says 70 billions. And I understand the government, not governmental bank, but some foundation raised money with very low interest. And so the company has to pay in certain period, longer than the average and good conditions. But on the other hand, it depends on the Japanese economy, one sense. And as you asked me, the price of whale meat is not so cheap. And it depends on how we can pay for the price. If during the research period of time, the price of whale meat was cheaper because it's highly subsidized. But if they have to be independent, I mean, the company has to be independent, meaning they have to sell in a price which they can survive. So we don't know yet how the company can survive of this bad economic conditions of Japan. So I'm sorry I cannot answer your question properly, but this is my feeling. But imagine we are going to make a new vessels and they have to pay back. So this is very special vessels, no other alternatives available. So they have to be survived.
All right.
This is my understanding. Yeah.
Sounds like we have a lot of questions online. So questions online?
Do they avoid pregnant whales?
Oh, thank you. But this is very difficult. From the top, we can identify the lengths or how far it is. But sometimes, of course, the pregnant whales were caught. But I think it's natural in Norway as well. And meaning, my understanding, I'm not a scientist, but if the species resources are healthy, it could happen, right?
Okay, question in the room.
It's hard. Thank you very much for this talk, which I really appreciate the humble way you presented it. This is a simple question, but it's hard to tell from this picture how this ship is different to the current one. It appears a bit smaller and shorter. Is that true?
No, thank you. As large as the current Nishimaru and as big as current Nishimaru. I'm sorry, I put the gross tons, but I understand this is like 9,000 gross tons or 8,900 something, almost as big as the current one. But difference is it has electricity driven, and they put containers. I mean, yeah, the ship hull is different from the current one. So easy to pull out the products. These days, it takes a week to get the products out. But the new one going to be smoother. That's what I heard.
All right, go ahead, Roseanne. Question online.
What was the most surprising to you about your experience on board the whaling vessels?
Thank you. If you watch some TV programs or film, movies, always the gunner was there. So I understand how gunner behaves. But on this particular factory ship, the flensers are the main characteristics. And very few TV programs or documentary focus on flensers. And I was so much surprised as their technique or their professional minded. And that was my most surprising things.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. It was a great presentation. I know some other studies have examined some communities that consume whale meat and have found different levels of toxins and contaminants. For instance, I know Russell Fielding found a study where he looked at communities in the Caribbean. They had really high levels of mercury and other contaminants, and then compared them to communities in Norway, and they had very low levels. So I was just wondering if Japan had any concerns about health contaminants related to whale meat, anything like that. Thank you.
Thank you. In case of mercury, I think it's a matter of coastal whaling, especially in Taiji. They consume a lot of pilot whales or dolphins. And as far as I understand, they made research on mercury on their hairs, and the result was high number of mercuries, but nobody shows a symptom of Minamata type ills. That's a reality. But on the other hand, the meat caught by this offshore whaling, I have no idea how much mercury was contaminated. I have no idea, and there is no such research. I think, I'm not sure, but as far as I know, there is no such research.
Great. Go ahead, Roseanne. Next question.
Does Japan also do scientific whaling in addition to commercial whaling, or is most data now collected by scientists aboard the commercial whaling ship?
Yes, still we have scientific research whaling, but not caught. I mean, on, how can I say, lookout. And some went to the North Pacific out of EEZ or up to near Hawaii. So they conducted two types in North Pacific and as well as Southern Oceans with scientists from IWC. They have a collaborative research project. But no specimen taken, only lookout research.
Other questions in the room?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I think I saw in some documentaries, people mentioning that in Japan, some of the whale meat was consumed by people that didn't even know that they were consuming whale meat, like in schools and these kind of things. And and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is only the information that I know. But I was just wondering, how was this transition like from being so distributed and then now is just so consumed by a specific group? You know, how this transition happened?
I'm sorry, may I ask you further?
So I heard before that some people in Japan were consuming whale meat on their day-to-day activities without even knowing that they were consuming. You know, sometimes in schools and these kind of things. I don't know if this is true. Maybe you can confirm this for me or not. And now you mentioned that, in fact, it's just a portion of the community there that consumed these. I was wondering how this transition happened, you know, from being more consumed to just a part of the population that is consuming now.
Oh, Okay, thank you. Wait a moment. So, my understanding, even before the war, the only western part of Japan are familiar with whale meat. But exception is two periods. One is the post-war food shortage period. And this time, for the first time, most of the old Japanese experienced the whale meat. But on the other hand, in the 60s up to now, I don't come across the exact reason why such a huge number of whale meat was consumed. Possibly in a not drinking, cheap drinking place. This is the beginning. This is the period of our rapid economic changes. And that's a time the normal people can dine out, was able to dine out, but no beef, steak, no. Just cheap. That time, whale meat was cheap. Cheap cutlet made by whale meat. This kind of episode is very common when I made an interview to ordinary peoples, my parents' generations. And school lunch is due to local governmental substitute, subsidies, thank you, subsidies. And some municipalities enhance consumption, but just once in a year or once in 2-3 years, and not that much. And those are deep fried whale meat. And I noticed that those meat are low grade of meat. And that's why the school lunch can afford. And it's not so tasty, I think. Is that okay, Lizzie?
All right, we're running out of time, but one more question online, Roseanne.
Yeah, do different generations in Japan have different opinions on whaling? I understand that in another region with whaling, the Faroe Islands, whaling has become an older person's activity.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree with you. I am going to be 60s in a few years. And when I teach this kind of issues at the university, most of the students are indifferent, either pro or against, indifferent. So that's a reality also. And due to school lunch, when I ask how many students who has been tasted whale meat, very few. And most of them are either from western part of Japan or school lunch. So this is a reality. And my age, my generation is the last to be familiar with whale meat. I'm from western part of Japan, and whale meat is everywhere. But I should be exception to normal Japanese, I think.
Okay, last question in the room. Roseanne, any last questions that you have online before we let Dr. Jun?
What did you learn while aboard the Nishimaru that you've applied to your research?
Thank you. It's easy because 2021 is middle of COVID-19. And that was my sabbatical year. And I looked for where to go, but most of the university abroad, no, we are not, sorry, we cannot accept you. And then finally, I asked the company through Japanese fisheries agencies, if you like, welcome. And for the first week, we wear the mask. And after that, we are segregated, totally segregated. So we became the normal life, drinking, chatting. And that's a real reason for that. And also, of course, from the research period, research wearing period, I asked the Japanese fisheries agencies to allow me to be on the boat, but I don't know the reason, but I was rejected. No. But after Japan withdrew from the IWC, and the company, as long as company say yes, I was able to join. So that's why, again, if you're interested in join the expedition, just let me know. I will introduce you to the company.
Great. Okay. Why don't we give our speaker one more round of applause? And Dr. Jun, we're so thankful that you shared your story with
pleasure.
us. Thank you so much. For everybody here, I hope to see you next week. And again, for those online, thanks for joining us. Thanks, everyone.